Hello, friends. I'm Wick, the Candleman, here to shed some light on the dark corners of your money. You wake up in the morning, brew your coffee, start your car, and head to work. You check your banking app, maybe look at the stock market, and feel pretty secure. You think your budget depends on the central bank's interest rates or your boss's mood. You truly believe you have absolute control over your hard-earned money and your financial future. But human psychology plays a funny trick on us all. It's called the illusion of control. The shocking truth is that your financial stability isn't controlled by your local bank at all. The price of your gas, your groceries, and even the phone sitting in your hand all depend on one tiny, salty strip of water on the other side of the planet. Imagine a bottleneck so impossibly small, its narrowest point is just exactly 21 miles wide. That's roughly the distance from a New Jersey suburb straight to the center of Manhattan. In this tiny gap, there are only 2 safe shipping lanes, each just 2 miles wide. Yet, every single day, 20 million barrels of oil are forced to squeeze through this tiny choke point. That is exactly 1/5 of the entire world's daily oil consumption, passing through a needle's eye. And a massive 1/3 of the world's liquefied natural gas passes right through here too. It's called the Strait of Hormuz. And it silently, invisibly rules your wallet. For decades, we built a global economy based on one incredibly fragile, almost naive assumption. We assumed this 21-mile stretch of water would simply always remain open and safe. But today, I'm going to show you the brutal math of what happens when it closes. And why you are already paying a hidden tax for this strait right now, without knowing it. You might be thinking, what's the big deal? The massive US Navy will just protect the ships. That makes perfect sense logically. But modern economic warfare doesn't play by traditional military rules. To absolutely destroy a global economy, nobody actually has to sink a single massive cargo ship. They just need to make the insurance for that ship impossibly, painfully expensive. Shipping companies don't operate on bravery or patriotism. They operate on cold, hard insurance math. To disrupt the global market, hostile forces don't need to build a perfect underwater minefield. They only need to plant one very powerful psychological seed in the market, the seed of doubt. When geopolitical tensions rise, war risk insurance premiums for giant oil tankers absolutely skyrocket overnight. They can jump from a tiny fraction of a percent to a massive premium in hours. That means an extra $250,000 is burned just for one single trip. Sometimes, these terrifying insurance rates jump 4 to 6 times higher in just one single week. When insurance disappears or becomes too heavy, the massive ships simply stop moving altogether. Out of the 138 ships that pass through daily, traffic could plummet to absolutely zero. Just from the psychology of fear. No shots fired, just completely frozen supply chains. And you might think this grand geopolitical chess game doesn't affect your personal bank account. You are completely wrong. Financial analysts have a very special name for this hidden cost. They call it the threat premium. And you pay it every single week of your life. Every time you fill up your car, $2 to $5 of every oil barrel isn't for refining. It's a fear tax. A fee for the constant geopolitical anxiety surrounding those 21 miles of water. You have been paying this premium for years, simply because nobody bothered to tell you. Let's do some brutal math together. What actually happens if the strait officially closes down? A total shutdown of the Strait of Hormuz is an absolute financial nightmare for the planet. It would cost the global economy roughly $20 billion of lost GDP every single day. That is $20 billion vanishing into thin air, wiping out wealth across the globe daily. But wait, the world has a backup plan, right? We must have a reliable safety net. After the 1974 oil crisis, the International Energy Agency was created exactly to protect us. For 50 years, they've been stockpiling massive strategic petroleum reserves for global emergencies. If a crisis hits, they can release 400 million barrels of oil into the open market. It sounds like a massive, heroic rescue plan that will magically save our entire economy. But here is the terrifying, mathematical reality of that giant 50-year-old safety net. Those 400 million barrels will only cover exactly 20 days of normal Strait of Hormuz traffic. Just 20 days. The world's ultimate, carefully planned backup plan burns out in less than 3 weeks. And what happens after those 20 days? Absolute emptiness and complete supply chain paralysis. Surprisingly, the United States wouldn't actually take the hardest hit from this historical disaster. Thanks to the shale revolution, the US could weather the storm with a few heavy bruises. The true, devastating catastrophe would unfold rapidly across the entire continent of Asia. Japan relies on this exact narrow strait for over 70% of its entire crude oil supply. Vietnam's internal oil reserves would completely run dry in under 20 days of a shutdown. When that happens, the giant factories producing the world's microchips will suddenly shut their doors. The electronics you buy, the computers, the cars you drive, the assembly lines simply stop. Our brilliantly complex global supply chain was never built to survive a massive heart attack like this. Now, most traditional financial channels stop the story right here, focusing entirely on oil. But the architecture of our modern world is far more complex than just gasoline and energy. The Strait of Hormuz isn't just an energy problem. It's a massive problem for your dinner plate. The countries bordering the Persian Gulf happen to sit on oceans of incredibly cheap natural gas. Because of this, they have quietly become the absolute fertilizer factory of the entire world. Nearly half of the world's urea production depends heavily on this exact unstable region. About a third of all globally traded fertilizers pass right through this same 21-mile bottleneck. These are the tiny white granules that literally force wheat, corn, and rice to grow worldwide. Without them, modern agriculture simply cannot produce enough food to feed the planet's massive population. During recent geopolitical spikes, global fertilizer prices skyrocketed by a staggering 50% in just 3 weeks. If those fertilizers can't reach the farmers, global crop yields will completely and utterly collapse. But human psychology makes us incredibly blind to this. We want to see immediate effects. You won't see this terrifying price spike in your local supermarket tomorrow morning. This massive agricultural system operates on a painful, slow 6 to 12-month delay. A food crisis doesn't explode in the spring when the massive ships actually stop moving. It explodes in the autumn, when the farmers finally harvest their incredibly expensive crops. The grain planted during a crisis permanently carries the massive cost of that expensive fertilizer. Your loaf of bread doesn't get more expensive because your local baker suddenly got greedy. It gets more expensive because ships carrying ammonia couldn't safely sail past Iran. But here is the most fascinating part of money psychology. Someone, somewhere, always profits. In every single global crisis, while the masses panic, capital quietly shifts to the winners. If Hormuz closes, do you know who will keep getting their absolutely vital oil shipments? China. The world's largest oil importer quietly takes in about 80% of all Iranian exports. In a massive crisis, China doesn't send roaring aircraft carriers to force the strait open. They use quiet, calculated diplomacy and massive economic leverage to keep their lifeblood moving. During recent blockages, while hundreds of ships sat paralyzed in massive oceanic traffic jams, ships with strong Chinese connections simply sailed right through the chaos completely untouched. This isn't just a story about boats, crude oil, or international shipping lanes anymore. This is the brilliant story of how absolute economic power changes hands without a single gunshot. While factories in Japan, South Korea, and Europe sit quietly in the dark without power, the massive Chinese industrial machine will just keep humming along, aggressively taking global market share. Experts have desperately warned the world about this critical vulnerability for many, many decades. Intelligence agencies ran top-secret briefings, and financial analysts wrote thousands of detailed white papers. But the global economy chose to completely ignore the massive, incredibly dangerous elephant in the room. Because the oil kept flowing, the money kept moving, and the fragile system felt absolutely invincible. As humans, we constantly build our lives, our monthly budgets, and our retirement investment portfolios on a myth. We act as if the entire world is a perfectly stable, perfectly predictable financial machine. We desperately want to believe that everything will just magically regulate itself in the end. But the true architects of capital know a deep, uncomfortable secret: long-term stability is an illusion. The modern economy is just 20 million barrels desperately trying to squeeze through a tiny 21-mile gap. You cannot control global geopolitics. You cannot fix the fragile international supply chain yourself. But as your friend Wick always says, you can absolutely control how you illuminate your own path. You can change exactly how you prepare your own family for these inevitable economic earthquakes. Keep a strong, reliable cash reserve. Do not choke yourself to death with unnecessary, toxic consumer debt. Diversify your assets globally so that a sudden crisis in one sector doesn't completely wipe you out. Understand this fundamental truth: when incredibly complex systems break, they break incredibly fast. When the massive economic dominoes fall, world leaders won't be coming to rescue your personal portfolio. The only thing that will genuinely save you is the solid financial architecture you built yesterday. The world will not wait for your permission to completely change its financial rules. The only question that truly matters is, will you be ready when the darkness finally comes? Start building your resilience today. Learn, adapt, and keep your financial flame burning bright no matter the storm. Thank you for watching, friends. I'm Wick, the Candle Man. Stay smart, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next video.